Hi, everybody. Scott Costa, the publisher of TED Magazine. Thanks for joining me. Another Distributed with TED Magazine podcast. It's been great. We've had so many downloads in 2022. I cannot thank folks enough. And the regular contributors are back. You know what's awesome is I didn't even put out any notes. I know them so well now. I know their bios. I don't have to tell folks. Desiree Grace is here. She's the 2017 NAED Trailblazer Award winner. And also Andrea Olson's here. Andrea is the CEO of Pragmadik, and she's a customer-centricity expert. No notes needed. They're my regular contributors. It's great having them back, and I really enjoy getting the chance to talk to them, and that's what I'm going to do today as we talk about succession planning. Again, it's an ongoing topic. It is super crazy important. We're still in what some folks are calling the great resignation or the great retirement. You call it both. You have to plan for the future. So we really want to continue to dig into this and make sure that you know your best practices. And I'm leading off with Desiree today. So Desiree, what are you seeing shaping up in the succession planning world in terms of the haves and the have-nots? Have we reached a point where it's like, okay, almost everybody has, or maybe, in your opinion, and I'll get by here in a little bit, it's like we still have a ways to go because it looks like there's some companies out there that still haven't put anything in motion yet. What do you see?
I do see a certain percentage that know they need to do it, but it's not a priority. Mm-hmm. Then the ones that are doing it, the bulk are treating it like a project. Okay, who's my successor? Check, done. What's the next thing on my to-do list? I'm going to make the argument that succession planning should be a program. It should be part of employee development. And it's never a project that's one and done because we know people are retiring, resigning, maybe they're moving laterally in the organization because they want to do something else. But the long and short of it is, if you're going to do succession planning right, it should be a program. And what I mean by that is you don't just identify one successor, plug it into an HR form and move on. Really, you ought to identify one or two successors. I'll quote the royal family. They always have an heir and a spare. But the idea behind that is legit. It's always good to have a plan A and a plan B because stuff happens. But I think your succession program should be robust. You should be part of employee development. And the reason why, it's a win for the company, it's a win for the person being promoted, and it's a win for the person moving on or possibly retiring. So I have a friend, she got promoted. They didn't backfill her for 10 months. She did both jobs, was incredibly burnt out and frustrated. Yep. Now, wouldn't you rather she was 100% focused on her new role, or maybe even 85% and 15% is helping onboard the new individual?
Yeah, no, I agree with you. I know exactly what you're saying, and it's not fair to have kind of that double whammy role because the plan wasn't really, all there. But let me follow up with you on that then, Desiree, in terms of, are you concerned? I'm generally concerned that folks take role about, okay, who's over 55? Okay, let's start a succession plan for him, instead of just having one for everybody.
Or at a bare minimum, critical roles. And certainly critical customer-facing roles, but there's other responsibilities within organizations that are critical. Maybe you've got a VP of supplier relations or director, or whatever the title is, but the person that owns the relationships with your mission-critical suppliers, what if that person goes to the ball game and is hit by a beer truck? Who's going to step in and manage those relationships, those contracts, those negotiations, especially right now with all the supply chain issues? You have to have somebody that could at least step up, step in, and make sure the trains run on time and stay on the tracks.
All right, so let me ask you then, Andrea, because I've got a lot of notes on that too. I'm jotting down stuff. We're going to follow up on a lot of things, but Andrea, let me ask you then: how do we sort of be disruptive, for lack of a better term? Again, the same people have been meeting with the same people, talking about the same things for extended periods of time, years and years. And now we're like, hey, we're introducing new people into the process as part of our succession plan. So now you're not just meeting with, one person or two people. Now you're going to meet with 3 or 4 at a time. Is that disruptive with your partners? Is that disruptive with your customers? Is that a smart way of operating your succession plan?
Wow, that's an interesting question.
Yeah.
And I look at this in a way that's very simple. So if you're at a restaurant and you're getting served by a waiter or waitress, and there's someone else that comes up next to them and they say, hi, hey, it's great to see you back again. This is Susie. She's my trainee today. Is there an issue with that? Is there a problem with that? That's, nothing out of the ordinary. And I think with business relationships, it's the same thing. You have someone else who say, hey, this person is kind of learning the ropes and blah, blah, blah. I'm still here. I don't think anyone's going to question that or see it in a negative light. But I think to Desiree's point about this, her example with her friend that was promoted and then they didn't backfill a job. There are these inherent cultural problems that are driving all these succession issues. And it is not simply about, okay, I don't know how to make a succession plan. Or, you know what, I'm starting too late. Or, oh gosh, who do I pick? I think it is really this huge bubble of insecurity. If I pick this person and they don't work out, what do I do? How do I tell the others that they're not being picked, right? How do we articulate, and Desiree, you brought this up, about these key roles. Who wants to be in a non-key role? Who wants to be the person that's not essential, right? So
yeah.
Look at the entire landscape of an organization and say, how do you incrementally help everyone raise their skills and talents and capabilities? And some of those people may even self-select. You can pick a person saying, this is who I want to be my successor. Maybe they don't want the job at all. Right. So I want to say it's not about you, but it's about stepping back and saying, what talents do I have in the organization? Could that role become 2 people instead of 1 doing 2 different skill sets? We look at it so binary and so linear and in a way where there's this A or B selection and you have to put together a plan and you have to follow that rigid plan. And people are not that way, right? People change their minds. Somebody that you've been grooming for years might move to Phoenix. And then you go, well, that's just now a big waste of time. So we have to look at it as you were saying, Desiree, more of a program, but it's more of a system. It's more of a innovative way to say, how can we use talent to solve our business problems rather than plugging in people into individual slots?
Yeah, I think there's a lot to be said for what are the roles, what are the responsibilities, and what are the desired results?
Yeah.
And it doesn't have to be binary. It doesn't have to be plug and play. You can certainly take a step back and say, strategically, we need to be prepared to get these results in the next 5 to 10 years. Maybe it's customer success, maybe it's vendor rationalization, who knows? It could be any number of strategic initiatives, but then realistically, your people power practices should align with your strategic initiatives. And to your point, maybe it's somebody working part-time, or maybe it is 2 people sharing a role. Or, hey, if the person that moves to Phoenix could do part of this remote,
sure.
Is that on the table? Right. It certainly should at least be open for discussion.
So, okay, so I'm going to throw a couple of things out at you now, because some of what Desiree said, some of what Andrea said have sparked some thoughts. I'm writing notes as fast as I can write notes. I'm going to need more paper. But so let me start with this. When you get part of your succession plan, so, okay, and again, you're talking about 2 roles or whatever. So somebody's going to retire or resign or whatever it is. To me, that gives me the opportunity to remodel the house, to say,
Yes.
okay, I don't want to do what, the way we always did it for 20 years. I'm just going to let you guys, I'm going to leave it at that and let you guys talk about it, but then I have more follow-up. So your thoughts on remodeling, like, you know what, maybe these positions and these job descriptions, it's time to change everything. Desiree, you start, and I'll let you guys go off. Good idea, bad idea, how that plays out.
Well, yeah, absolutely. Sometimes when somebody leaves for whatever reason, sometimes there is an opportunity to take a fresh look at the org. Maybe your head of marketing gets poached by somebody, and rather than just promote her second in command, maybe it's an opportunity to look at her roles and responsibilities and say, hey, would there be a more effective way to do this? Could we maybe take that job and not backfill it, but instead get 2 specialists and maybe roll them into reporting to someone else? That's something that might be worth considering. I think there's value in taking a step back on a consistent basis and strategically looking at your organization. And does the current structure and the current deployment serve your strategy?
Yeah.
And yes, when people leave, that's an opportunity to do that.
Or, and I'm going to let Andrea cut in on this too, or there's the opportunity to say, you know what, Jane is great at this. So when so-and-so resigns or retires, let's reorganize things so that we're playing to Jane's strengths, because that's going to make us better. That seems to make the most sense to me, instead of saying, well, I know Jane is great at whatever, video marketing, using your marketing thing, but we really need somebody who can crunch the budget in marketing. And so the succession plan is we're going to have Jane be a numbers person. It just seems like, and Andrea, I'll ask you, it just seems like it really gives you the opportunity, at least to me, to say, all right, let's take a look at what our real strengths are of people that are in the organization. So we're not hiring from the outside. We're using what is done internally and say, now let's rebuild everything and rebuild job descriptions.
And that's a great point, because that's one of the first things, in my past life and actually with clients today we do is try to do an index of people's not only skills, but interests and hobbies. So like, let's use this marketing example. You go, gosh, we have a need. This guy retired. He used to do all the photography, and now we just need a new photographer person for products or whatever. If you knew that someone else in the organization was a hobby photographer and they love doing it, you're giving them an opportunity to use a skill they love. They get, a little bit more scope of work. Maybe they get a little bit more pay, and they're doing something that they really enjoy, right? Easy peasy, donezo. But the problem is that we kind of have these very narrow views of people and their abilities and their talents. Because, hey, if someone's a graphic designer, that's what they do. That's all they do. There's nothing else. And maybe someone has a mathematical bent that would be advantageous, whether there's a job opening or not, in some other way that supports the strategy. Or in another case, we had the need for someone to implement is a better word, a CRM platform for Salesforce, or our Salesforce, not the Salesforce.com platform. And there wasn't budget for a new body. And the directive, and I remember having deep arguments with this senior vice president, told me at the time, this is 20 years ago, train the graphic designer to do it. Train them to do software development and implementation, which was this was destined to fail. And this poor gentleman, he tried his best. He didn't think this way, And so the effort was that you're sending them on a path for frustration, stress, so many things. And then of course, at the end of the day, it was like, well, you didn't perform. I mean, incredibly terrible. So when we're, I know that's a slight tangent, but when we're talking about succession planning, it's not just about backfilling holes, right? It's about looking at the whole person and really examining what you need versus what you can outsource. Some things that you have in-house and had in-house, you might not need. So that whole reinventing, redesigning the room, redesigning the house, this should be happening each and every day, just a little bit. But we're so mired in implementation, getting stuff done, people wearing too many hats. Nobody's looking at strategy anymore. Nobody has time to sit and ponder these big ethereal questions. And this is the core problem. We are so busy. I just need a body to fill this slot and I'm going to do it. And I'm going to wait until the 9th hour, the 11th hour, get that filled. And I'm just going to pick someone at the moment. So it really goes way, way, way back to the way we're thinking about culture and the way we're taking time to look at organizational strategy and succession planning strategy.
Well, and I do think you need to look at what are the results you need this person to achieve. And I think there's a tendency to focus on tasks rather than desired results. Mm-hmm. And that's where you lose the strategic piece, because you got a hamster on a hamster wheel accomplishing tasks without necessarily looking at which tasks should be the priority. How do the tasks play out to the greater strategy? Are all the tasks necessary? And if you do your succession planning based on the results I need, you might do something differently. I was reading an article a couple of days ago that to me was really, really interesting. And it was this idea of, do we really need another VP of sales? Maybe we need a chief revenue officer. Because it's not just about more sales to more customers. Maybe it's looking at bundling services or getting into ancillary complementary markets or cross-selling or biz dev. Mm-hmm. And so I think that's just one example of, is there a better way to frame up the results we need and to do it strategically? But I still come back to the argument that even if you're going to redeploy your current people, what are you doing to position them to be successful? That's issue A. But issue B, you still got to get the job done. The trains still need to arrive on time. And then issue C, my friend, you're not allowing people to be successful in their new role if you've got, a weight around their neck, tethering them to their old role. So that's why I think some of this needs to be programmatic, and there needs to be some strategic best practices from an HR perspective that says, okay, we need to build out a methodology to do some of this that makes sense.
Desiree, great point there. I'm sorry, but that's a good question. You said HR. Where is HR?
Yes.
Relegated to some gravel pit in the basement, where it's like, okay, just fill these slots and do the paperwork for benefits, et cetera. Right? I think, when we're talking about capitalizing on the things you mentioned, where's HR's involvement here, right? Why have they been relegated to just the rubber stampers on things?
Well, and I think that's the difference between organizations. When you talk about organizational DNA or company culture, I think that is one huge differentiator. Is HR a strategic business partner? Or is HR a task-oriented admin? Mm-hmm. And certainly you need both in all facets of an organization, but if you're really going to move your organization forward and to deal, as Scott said, with the great resignation, the great retirement, HR should be in the C-suite, having those strategic business conversations and trying to help that organization drive for results.
And I think that the reason why that doesn't occur, the slight tangent here, is that we talked about everyone, even the executive level, being mired in tactics.
Yes.
Implementation. This goes back to culture, which is the core of all of this, is that there is no trust in the organization. If the CEO trusted his subordinates and those subordinates trusted their subordinates, they could have time to look at strategy. They could have time to have these conversations that you're mentioning, Desiree. Time to think about, how do I want to develop people, right? How do we want to go about doing this in a new and different way? But they don't have time because we are way too mired in the implementation of what do I got to get done today.
And that's how and why people burn out.
Yeah. And so when you're talking about succession planning, everyone else sees this happening. And when you say, I'm a senior VP of such and such, I need to have a succession plan, all your people are going, I don't want that job. I am writing this out as long as I can. I do not be tapped for that.
So I'll take this to the next level. Again, you talked about trust and again, not kind of having spending more time doing tactics and not having a succession plan. I feel like if you are spending your time convincing yourself it'll be fine, perhaps it's not going to be fine because you really haven't planned any succession plan. And you're just putting somebody into a role thinking, oh, no, it'll be fine. We're going to work with her. We're going to work with them. It'll be fine. I mean, tell me you don't see that. Tell me, I mean, it happens
every day. Every day and for years at a time. I mean, you look at other problems in organizations. Pick your problem. And how long has that problem been hanging around? Long time, right? It'll be fine. Yeah, we need to do it. It'll be fine. It'll be fine. Until it's literally a Molotov cocktail that is on fire. Oh, then, okay, now, and it's like, oh, this is a big problem. Really? This problem's been around a long time.
Yeah, and you made it. Yeah.
We don't have time. I can't tell you how many senior executives I've worked with that their job is strategy. And they have literally said, I don't have time for that.
Yeah.
What are you doing? No, you should. That's the thing and only thing you should be having time for, strategy and people. So your problem underlying this whole succession thing.
And are we promoting people because so-and-so is a good guy, or so-and-so has been with the company a long time, or so-and-so really understands what I want to do, also known as brown nosing.
Yeah.
Are we promoting the right people for the right reasons?
No.
That's the other piece around succession planning. If you're promoting somebody because they're a loyal, good guy, is that really going to take your organization to the next level?
I agree with you. Trust me, I'm a big believer in, and I've seen it in other things that I've done where it's like, that guy sells a lot of stuff and he's a great salesperson, but we haven't given him any leadership training whatsoever. And now he's the sales manager. And so he looks at everybody around him and he says, how come you can't sell as much stuff as I did? It's like, well, because you're not really giving me any management here. You're just kind of thinking everybody knows how to do this because it was really easy for you and you were awesome at it.
And it goes back to skills though. Because he was a great salesman does not mean he's a great sales manager. That is an entirely different role with an entirely different skill set. And so, but that problem happens all the time. All the time.
I know. All right, so I'm going to go negative one more time, and then we'll end on a positive note that you should have a succession plan. Desiree, I'll start with you on this one. You have a succession plan. So I'm sorry, everybody's laughing at me. So you have sort of this, okay, here's the person that we really think is going to fit this role, and here's the next person who's going to fit that role, and here's the third person who's going to fit that role. There always seems to be that one person that you're like, yeah, he's just good at whatever, but he's not in the succession plan. Should that guy still be around?
Sure. And I'll tell you why. First of all, you need competent Indians, and this is not meant to be a slam against Indigenous people. Let me be very clear there.
Yeah.
You need your worker bees. Let's choose that analogy instead.
Okay.
You also need your subject matter experts. And, I've talked about making sure the trains run on time. The strategy is, do we need to build new tracks? Do we need to add intermodal capability? Do we need to add a new destination? But you still need the trains to arrive on time safely and stay on the tracks. So there is still an imperative to have people perform functions that are necessary, and organizations need subject matter experts.
Yep.
My brain goes to the IT department. The worker bees in IT, if it weren't for them in today's environment, we would all be SOL. I'm keeping this clean because it's a family podcast.
I respect that. I don't want to have to go to a next level on these podcasts. So thanks so much. Appreciate that. But I see what you're saying. Andrea, what do you think about that? I mean, are there people that get left behind or not a part of the succession plan that after a while you're like, the management mindset kind of becomes, this person's just a worker bee?
To Desiree's point, it somewhat depends. But I would say the one of the biggest risks in organizations today is the loss of, again, same analogy, tribal knowledge. Okay, where you've got a handful of people that know the ins and outs of the organization, how things operate, certain platforms, processes, etc. And if they were gone, things would grind to a screeching halt. And so the strategies I've seen have been the hope and pray strategy, right? Hope they don't leave, hope they don't get hit by a bus. There's been we need to transfer their knowledge, kind of like the Matrix, to some other people. And so we need to make that happen. Great, wonderful decree. Thanks. That's really helpful. Or there's been okay, how do we make and reproduce this person like Dolly the sheep? Can we make another one?
Cloning. It's all about the cloning.
Cloning. And so then it's like, this is one of the biggest risks in your organization. And these are the three options that you're putting on the table for yourself. None of these make sense. So when you talk about succession planning, it's not this one, again, it's stepping back and looking at the bigger picture. It's not this one person. This person learned from someone else. They have people around them that they learn from. This is a career path for people. This person happens to be maybe at the top or in some very key role. But you need to look at, how am I curating knowledge in a way that's incentivized for that person that maybe, isn't moving up. They're staying in that slot, but they're critical. And what's the value to them in giving all their knowledge to somebody else, some newbie, that they're not getting more incentive for it? And basically, you're training someone to take your job. Everybody's aware of that. We're not idiots. So that's decentivizing as well, oftentimes, especially for these people that have been in a position of power because of their knowledge. So you have to approach this in a whole different way and step back and look at the culture and say, it's not about one individual, it's about the whole. And that department, everyone has to have a better understanding. And part of your incentive as an employee is to grow that. So then succession planning becomes a lot easier. You don't have to fill that one slot. You have a lot of people that have diverse pieces of this knowledge, this tribal knowledge, that stays within the organization. And then you can make any combination you need to backfill that role.
What a great conversation. Not just, again, for the management side, but even for the, again, the employee side, the person who wants to be a part of a succession plan. I think, again, we got together right before this before we hit the record button. We're like, let's talk about a couple of things. And then this just grew into just a great conversation. And you guys are just amazing. And I can't thank you enough for hopping on again and being regular contributors and giving us all this insight and again, sparking so many thoughts in my mind about, hey, what about this? What about it'll be fine? What about, so I really appreciate everything you guys, talked about today about succession planning, and there's going to be a million more succession planning conversations down the road. But thanks so much, Desiree Grace, Andrea Olson, for hopping on the Distributed with TED Magazine podcast and taking us through this process one more step. Really appreciate you guys. All right. Well, listen, if folks want to contact me too about this podcast, other TED Magazine things, the digital edition, everything that we're doing, still 2 ways to do that. Give me a phone call. 314-812-5311. I'm going to make you guys memorize my phone number now instead of me just memorizing your bios. Or you can hit me up on an email, scosta, SCOSTA at NAED.org. Thanks, everybody, for watching. Thanks, everybody, for listening to the Distributed with TED Magazine podcast.